Welcome everybody to the beginning of something special here on my channel as we return to what I used to do before I became a full sports commentator, realistic simulation sports Dynasty modes. Now, most of you guys who watched any of my Dynasties know that I took over the Kansas Jayhawks. I got about 4 seasons in, and I got a little bored with it. I had a connection with the team, but I just didn't feel like it was truly going anywhere. And today, I wanted to get back into simulation sports, but I wanted a fresh start and not just picking up where I left off with the Jayhawks, because that seemed like the lazy thing to do. Now, you might be asking, why did I pick the Gamecocks? Now, first off, they're obviously my favorite team. If you haven't checked out my channel recently, I do a recap of their games every Saturday night after they happen. Typically, it goes up, though, on Sunday morning. So first off, the Gamecocks are my favorite team. Secondly, you might be asking, well, this team's good. They're probably a higher overall just because of their roster. Why would you take over a team that is that high of an overall? And the way I look at it is, this is a team that we have seen on the edge of being competitive year after year. And it just seems like, they always have all the talent in the world, but unfortunately with their coaches, they're never able to quite get there. They finish the seasons, with 3 wins, with 4 wins, but yet it still feels like they have much more talent than they actually, show up on their, or what shows up on their schedule. And that's one thing I want to do, is get this team over the hump. Now, obviously in real life right now, they are led by head coach Shane Beamer, who's in his 2nd year, having a fairly successful season. They sit at 5-3 right now after a 7-6 year last year. So it is a good start for Beamer. But today, in an alternate reality, we get to go in and we take over this team with former Jayhawks head coach Belak Shmeems. As most of you know, as I mentioned, he was a very good head coach at Kansas. He had a couple good winning seasons there after a rough start. He started 5-7, but after that, it was very quick to turn it around and get into the, a bowl game. He won 3 bowl games straight. He didn't win a Big 12 championship game, but head coach Shmeems is back and better than ever when it comes to taking over rebuilding teams. Obviously, we will be running the South Carolina offensive playbook. We're going to have a fairly run-heavy offense. I want to try and make this as realistic as possible. And as you all know, Marshawn Lloyd is an absolute monster. So we're going to try and get him the ball as many times as possible. Defensively, we're going to be running Clayton White's head coach or defensive coordinator scheme of 4-2-5. We're going to have a relatively average defense. We want to be aggressive, but also conservative at the same time. So it's not like there's going to be a lot of changes there. And speaking of which, let's go ahead and look at our other coaches. Now, there's a lot of controversy right now if you talk about, offensive coordinators and stuff like that. There's just a lot of Marcus Satterfield hate going around. And unfortunately, in this game, you can't really control the, whether or not the offensive coordinator leaves or not. So it's not like I can fire him, but I guess I could technically edit him to become a new coach. But here's our offensive coordinator, Marcus Satterfield. He's got a lot of experience. He was with the Carolina Panthers for a little bit there. Alma mater is Tennessee. Sits at 47 years old, and he is basically, obviously, an offensive weapon. He currently wants us to run that. I'm going to go ahead and change this to, I know he runs more of a pro-style offense, so if we could just find like a pro-style offense right there, that is definitely what I would prefer to run. So that is a good start for Marcus Satterfield there. We're going to have to see how he does, and if we don't actually do that great this season, we'll look and see whether or not Satterfield needs to get fired. But on the other side, a guy that's been relatively impressive is Clayton White. Now, obviously, these are newer guys in this simulation, so he doesn't have a lot of statistics, but Clayton White has had an impressive showing out of North Carolina State. That's his alma mater, but he was basically a dominant force when it came to last year, creating turnovers, wreaking havoc, and that has pretty much continued this year. The Missouri Tigers did take down the Gamecocks last week, but South Carolina was able to hold them to just 3 points or 6 points the entire second half. So a good job by the Gamecocks. So both of those guys, as of right now, are safe on the roster. But let's go ahead and get into the actual meat of this introduction episode. I know this is what you are all here for. The actual roster. Now, there's so much talent on this roster, and the quarterback position is another position that is very, very, debated. There's an actual debate whether or not right now Luke Doty should come in over Spencer Rattler. But as we all know, Spencer Rattler, transfer from Oklahoma, number 7, the right-handed junior quarterback. He sits at 6'1", 215 pounds. He's got a lot of talent. Not the fastest guy, but he can run when needed. And if you look at his throw power and accuracy, he is a very, very good quarterback. But right behind him sits Luke Doty, a guy from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, the homegrown guy, a guy that I think maybe we should change his face because that doesn't really look like Luke Doty at all. I'd prefer this maybe a little bit, but a guy that definitely has a different skill set to Spencer Rattler. He's much more of a read option scramble type quarterback, but he can also throw it pretty effectively. Unfortunately for us, his accuracy is not quite as high as you would like. Behind them, though, we have 3 straight freshmen: Colton Gautier, Braden Davis, and Tanner Bailey. One of these guys, Braden Davis, is actually Mr. Football out of Delaware. One of these guys will be the starting quarterback of the foreseeable future, but as of right now, we have a battle between Rattler and Doty. Go ahead and comment down below right now here on episode 1 who you think should get the nod here at the first quarterback start of the season next week when we head into that matchup. Next up, we've got a very good running back group here. Marshawn Lloyd, number 1 on the field and number 1 in the depth chart. He is a sophomore redshirt, former one of the highest recruits that South Carolina got just a few years ago. He has shown so much talent this year. And behind him, though, we have a couple of very talented guys as well. Sophomore Juju McDowell, senior out of Wake Forest, Christian Bill Smith, Lavesa Carroll, a freshman redshirted coming in this season, and Rashad Amos, a guy that, unfortunately for him, hasn't been able to find a spot on the roster all that well, and will hopefully find a way to get him involved at some way, shape, or form. Next up, we have the fullbacks, none technically on the roster right now, so we'll skip over that for right now. Xavier Legette, Josh Vann, and Amarion Brown headway the wide receiver position, led by a lot of seniors. Jalen Brooks is a senior. DeKirion Jr. is a senior. Corey Rucker is a junior. Antoine Wells Jr. is a junior, obviously. And Landon Sampson is a freshman. So we're going to have to recruit a lot of receivers this year, but led by star receiver Josh Vann, this receiving core is extremely talented. At the tight end position, we've got the jack of all trades, the Swiss Army knife, Jaheim Bell, followed up by more traditional tight end senior Austin Stogner. And then behind him, we've got Nate Atkins, who kind of runs that hybrid between fullback and tight end. He is a very talented guy. And behind them, we have Trayvon Kenyon, who has been a talented guy across his few years at South Carolina. He's just struggled to get on the field. Now we're going to fly through these next few positions. Left tackle, we've got Ja'Kai Moore and Jalen Nichols, 2 junior offensive linemen. Vershawn Lee, Trey Jones, and John Darius Morgan in at that left guard position. Eric Douglas, the senior, leading the offensive line at center, and following him up, we have Hank Manos. Next up, we've got Jovan Gwynn at the right guard position, followed by Wyatt Campbell and Colin Henrich. Next up, right tackle, we've got the big man, redshirt senior, 5th-year senior Dylan Wanham leading the way. Behind him, we've got Tyshawn Wanamaker, a sophomore who will likely have a good next few years here at South Carolina. And at the end there, we have Ryan Brubaker. Next up, we get to the defensive situation. Sitting there at 6'6", 275 pounds, we have the speedster himself, Jordan Birch, the highly touted recruit. He struggled his first few years to make an impact. Hopefully this year can be his breaking out season. Behind him, we've got Tyreek Johnson and Hot Rod fitting there at that left end position. Right end, we've got Jordan Strawn, 6'5", very, very good player here, sitting at number 7 there as well, copying Spencer Rattler. He is a senior, but behind him, we've got some talented guys. Gilbert Edmond is a guy that has showed some talent there, number 8, 6'5", 255 pounds. And behind him, we have junior Terrell Dawkins at that right end position. And now, possibly the most talented position of the roster, Zach Pickens, number 6, the defensive lineman, a senior this season, but he sits at an 87 overall. Behind him, he is followed up by another senior in MJ Webb. Alex Huntley, a sophomore, Tonka Hemingway, one of my favorite names on the roster, Nick Barrett, and TJ Sanders. Now, no left outside linebackers technically, but Mohamed Bamba is there. Unfortunately, in real life, he got injured for the whole season, but thankfully, we have him right here. Sherrod Green, another senior there. A lot of seniors on this roster. And Stone Blanton sitting at that third middle linebacker position. Next up, we have right outside linebacker, Brad Johnson, Debo Williams, Darrell Ware, and Donovan Westmoreland, a freshman there as well. So a lot of talent at those linebacker positions, And cornerback position is pretty shored up. I'm kind of confused where Cam Smith is. For whatever reason, they have him at strong safety. I will be starting him at cornerback most likely. But anyways, we have the junior Marcellus Dial, Darius Rush, O'Donnell Fortune, Kwan Banks, Keenan Nelson Jr., and Emery Floyd Jr. Free safety, we have Devontae Reed, another talented senior, DQ Smith, Anthony Rose, and strong safety is led by Cam Smith, who, like I said, will be probably sliding over to that cornerback position. RJ Roderick, who unfortunately transferred in real life, but hopefully can have an impact here. David Spalding, and young budding freshman Nick Eminori. And obviously the final two positions, kicker Mitch Jeter and punter Kai Kroger. A lot of talent on this roster, but as we stated, they have struggled to put it together. And now before we end this introduction video, I am going to set up the custom schedule for this season. Obviously, I made it where we have a protected rivalry against Texas A&M. We're not going to be playing UCF. I want to actually reset most of these. I don't want to be playing an FCS East team. So let's go ahead and sit here and see who we can play in this opening week. Probably going to be a bit of an easier game, but there is a few teams on here that I could see us opening up with that would make sense. And overall, I think I'm going to go with the Charlotte 49ers, a team that's not really talented, but they're relatively close by. Makes a lot of sense for us to play them. And then we'll go to a 3 straight SEC stretch, have a bye week, take on Kentucky, and then we will have another game here in between before we get into the actual meat of our schedule, where we will probably take on not a lot of good options here. I am going to say that we'll probably have to take on somebody else later in the season because I don't like a lot of those matchups. Unfortunately for us, there's not a lot of good matchups here, so we'll probably just stick with Liberty or South Alabama. I'm going to lean towards South Alabama. They're not a great team, but a couple of good players on that roster, and that's where the schedule is going to sit as of right now. We play as our 2 cross-division matchups, Texas A&M, Mississippi State this season. Thank you all for joining me for this introduction episode. I hope you all enjoyed this part of the series. As always, if you did enjoy, hit the like button and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so you are always up to date every time I upload, especially with this series. This will likely be a 2 times a week thing. Thank you all for watching, and we shall see you guys next time as we open up the season against the Charlotte 49ers.